today's panel for the global music education. And for this topic, we invited two professors in Southampton University. They are very experienced in music higher education in different fields. Professor Francesco Izzo and also Mr. Neil Simpson Treloar. Okay, and I think today's topic is about global music education, and we are going to discuss about music education, or we are seeing the future of the music education globally. And I'm the CEO of the StarCubs under Kanjian Music, and my name is Xiaowei Hu. And let's begin our panel. And first of all, let professors to introduce themselves. Professor Francesco Izzo, please.
Yes, good morning, and thank you very much for the invitation. My name is Francesco Izzo. I've been teaching at the University of Southampton since 2007. I am a pianist and a musicologist, and my primary area of interest and expertise is opera, especially Italian opera of the 19th century. I am Italian myself. I studied musicology in the United States, where I lived for several years, and I am passionate in particular about the performance practices of opera, but also about how opera can be significant socially and culturally. So I hope we can talk a little bit about these themes in the course of our discussion.
Okay, thank you. And then Neil, please.
Hi, my name's Neil Simpson Treloar. I'm predominantly an artist manager in the mainstream music business. I deal with alternative singer-songwriters, pop bands here in the UK. I joined the faculty, the amazing music faculty at the University of Southampton just last year on a new international music management MA. And we're talking about the modern music industry and navigating all the changes in 2021, accelerated changes. Yeah, I've worked a lot in mainstream music education. There's here in the UK, there's been a sort of boom of guitar, bass, drums, vocals, production, music business courses since famously the Brit School, I believe, in the early 90s. There's been quite a growth in that area, and I've worked at a couple of sites working, engaging in creating accelerated experience for the student body. So whilst they're at college, having more time on stage, more time creating, more time in the studio, creating pathways into the music industry for both musicians running auditions, but also entrepreneurs and people working in right across the music business. So I'm from a very different side of the fence, but very happy to be working with the University of Southampton team. It's an incredible, some incredible people.
Yeah, thank you, Neil. I think to talk about music education, especially the higher education, it's a very wide topic. But today we're going to focus on very specific topics that probably more suitable for you two to answer. We raise the same questions, similar questions, but based on the different experiences, you will have a different perspective and different views. I think as an educator, it's not an easy job because music is art, but also it's business, and it's a lifelong development. In terms of the music education globally, it has a long history. So Professor Francesco Izzo, your focus is on the 19th century opera research, 200 years over. What have you experienced or research show that changed in these higher educational fields in the music education?
Thank you. That's a fantastic question and a very broad question. For one thing, opera as a form of expression. And right now, just to be clear, I'm talking about Western opera. As I said before, I specialize in Italian opera, but let's say European opera, generally speaking. And until just a few decades ago, let's say until the 1950s or 1960s, opera was not regarded as a musical genre worthy of serious investigation or meaningful from an educational standpoint. Opera was rather regarded as entertainment and not something that one should study seriously. Then things began to change, and so I belong to a second generation of scholars who really take opera seriously and who think that opera can and in many cases should be part of the training of today's musicians and music historians and musicologists. So that is a very broad point. More specifically, coming to my area, I work on music that is actually quite popular, quite well known. There is a lot of opera, music by Giuseppe Verdi, for example, that is quite well known in the sense that people will recognize a certain melody, a certain tune, perhaps from having heard them in a film soundtrack or in a television commercial, advertisement. And yet one doesn't necessarily how to place opera. And for me, it is very important to understand how certain operatic music became so important and widely disseminated, so to speak. And this goes in turn to the communicative power of opera. Opera, just to spell it out very broadly in very general terms, is about telling stories through music. Opera is theater. There are characters, there is a storyline, there is drama, and then all of it is set to music. So when we talk about opera with my students, at this point, the challenge and the opportunity and the excitement comes from discussing not only individual composers or works or musical styles, but very generally how you can communicate through music or by combining words and music. That's really what makes opera very meaningful from my standpoint in higher education. And for me, the greatest success is when I can draw students to take an opera module, to come to lectures in opera, but those students aren't necessarily passionate about opera. They aren't even aware necessarily of what opera is. And what I like to do is try to build up interest and excitement and to show that even if you're not specializing in opera, you may be a songwriter, you may be interested in music business, you may be a pianist or a violinist, and yet opera can be relevant to you because it tells you how music functions, it tells you how music communicates with an audience, ultimately.
Very interesting topic about the communication between arts and the performers and the audiences. What higher education can offer to these music professionals? Many people have already been very excellent in techniques before they go into the universities. Even they have a very strong composing power. But what higher education can actually offer to these professionals?
Yeah, I think partly a community and network opportunities straight away. The education is a fantastic way to kind of pull like-minded people together, and you always encourage people, our students to be productive and work hard, practice hard, and I've seen it many, many times where you can create a culture within a cohort of students, which is very positive and very hard-working. And I think, and with the environment where you've got access to rehearsal spaces, other musicians, producers, it's all about beginning your network and your career, whatever your career path may be. You can accelerate that side of things, your network and again, just the time playing. You would, outside of a conservatoire or university or a specific campus for music, it would be harder to access those other players, harder to access people that would help you be inspired and motivated. It's that, you know, if you get the culture right, it could be a very, very positive environment in many, many ways.
I think that's absolutely spot on, Neil. I mean, ultimately, yeah, higher education is where you prepare to be a professional. And when you're studying something like music, you prepare also to be, you know, a stronger communicator in so many ways. So whether you are to become a performer or someone who works in the music industry from a business management perspective, or someone who is creative in the sense of being a composer, for example, the higher education experience gives you the broad training, the exposure to a variety of approaches. So you're absolutely correct when you say that many people are excellent musicians even before they get into university and do a degree in music. There is absolutely no question about it. But in university, let's remember that the word university has to do with the universe. And in university, what you get is the breadth of experience, the way of thinking differently about many things. And also you get trained in things that are perhaps not your primary area of interest or concern, but that nonetheless give you the breadth of thinking and experience that really make you a strong professional.
I see. I'm very curious about when these people go to the universities, they are going to be part of the industry. They have to think about a lot of different directions, but especially Neil, you are leading a very complicated, you know, educational system, and management is a very broad concept, especially for the music industry. Can you share about your experiences, about your focus can actually benefit the music industry?
Well, I was talking specifically from an artist management or music management point of view, which is what I teach. We are seeing such accelerated change globally, politically, economically, socially, technologically. You know, there's so much happening, and actually, the entire music industry and all global industries are experiencing this accelerated change at the same time. So, what we get to do on the MA course is really encourage, like Francesco said, the breadth of thinking across all areas. So if you're running an artist business, or you're a composer and you're releasing, you have to understand that we live in a world of social media. That's not changing. TikTok, for example, right across the world has become such a fundamental discovery platform, and all short video platforms. It's, you could argue that, the pre-internet days of radio, press, television, print, and them being the gatekeepers of new art or new audio, new music, that the entire value chain's been completely disturbed. And in the past 24 months, it's been disturbed even further. It's accelerated even further. So we're navigating this very, very changing wave of change. So I make a point of, with my artist businesses, I have to be try and be ahead of that change. I have to try and forever look at my artist businesses and what we can do as management to generate more exposure, generate more revenue streams, creating more opportunities, and all the challenges and changes that are happening all the time. So because myself and the other senior teaching fellow, Jodie, we're working on the front line of these changes. When we're not at the university, we can really help the music management students navigate these changes from a real perspective, from a real point of view. This is happening right now. Here's the articles you need to read. Here's the data behind these changes. So there's on the International Music Management Masters that we have a really good balance of academic research and also real world case study. There's a combination that is really really sets our students up. I would argue they're coming out of this MA having some real world knowledge, and should they continue their reading the way that we've taught them to, they'll stay at the forefront of change as well. We're teaching them to stay at the forefront of change because it's that's everyone in the music industry that I deal with. We're constantly talking about all these social and technological changes. It's so dramatic and so fast moving. It's a big part of your role as somebody who supports the artist industry. You have to stay across it. So that's one of the, that's one of the key ways that there's evidence of real numbers certainly coming through our program, from the start to the end. The students really know. The students really know what they're talking about when it comes to copyright, when it comes to marketing, when it comes to creation. They really understand it.
Well, yeah, it sounds like a very complicated for students to actually have all these kind of perspectives and integrate them. Well, I guess how long do you think these students need to be quite comfortable and really understand?
If I understand correctly, it depends on the individual and their own ambitions and pathways.
Sure.
So you'll find we've certainly on the management masters, we have a percentage of the students come in as a musician, often a classical pianist, or they come from a non-music pathway, or they've come from undergrad music, not so much from business, but there's a lot of producers and performers. So the individual will then be drawn to things that match their ambitions. So if you're a self-composing performer, us teaching them about all the different ways for marketing and promotion in 2021, they're soaking up as a performer. If they are wanting to become an artist manager themselves, they focus in on. We try and give people the language to be able to communicate with all the different parties, and an artist manager will be dealing with, whether it's record companies, live agents, promoters, everyone in the music industry value chain. We teach them to communicate, lawyers, accountants. We teach them core language and rhetoric to be able to communicate and understand what all these different people do. So I would say that some people, there's obviously a percentage of people that react and engage and adopt these practices very, very quickly. And like any room full of people react differently. But on the whole, I think we can instill a certain approach and a certain mentality towards their analysis of the music business, which will then help them focus and channel their own career pathway. I think that's what we're trying to achieve.
I think for Professor Izzo, it's very precious that the Western countries, you have a very good documentation about all the different historic stages. Why we call it record label, because they keep the records, not like what we do in China. When we talk about the documentation about music, for over 2,000 years or even 3,000 years, we only have very little documentation left. What do you think these good documentation and the data help your research?
Wow, that's a fabulous question, a very, very important question, which goes to the root of what music is. Because for most people on Earth, music is not something that you read, it is not something that you touch, it is something that you hear or something that you make. It has to do with sound and communication. But in Western musical culture, we tend to assume and rely on the fact that music is written down. Okay, I mean, I'm sitting at my piano right here, and I actually have a score. This is one of Giuseppe Verdi's operas, Un ballo in maschera. And if I open this score, of course, there are notes, and some people can read them, some cannot. There are words as well. So this is, tangible. You can touch it, you can hold it, it has a weight. But in a great deal of musical traditions around the world, music is actually not written down. It is transmitted orally. It is passed down from generation to generation by learning, memorizing, varying, changing, and so on and so forth. And so what you have is intangible heritage. We have a fantastic colleague in our department at the University of Southampton. Her name is Hetty Malcolmson, and she is an ethnomusicologist. And she conducts ethnographic research, which is not text-based in the sense that it is not based on written documentation. It is rather based on what you hear, on how music is communicated through a variety of channels, but not necessarily in writing. In my field, I'm tempted to say we almost have too much written documentation, because for any opera I study, for any piano composition or symphony, any classical composition, we have not only a written text, such as an autograph manuscript by a composer that could be Beethoven or Chopin or Verdi or Stravinsky, but we also have different editions where there are a variety of details that are contrasting with each other. Then we have recorded evidence, and I like how you described, the record labels, because they keep a record. They transmit, sort of witness accounts of what music sounds like at a certain point in a certain place, made by certain people, and for that too we have an abundance, of course. But in other musical traditions, I don't pretend to be a specialist in Chinese music, although I would like to be. And when I've been in China, I've had some really wonderful and actually very moving experiences. For example, listening to street musicians in the parks of Beijing. But I don't know how it works. What I do know is that there is a great deal of musical heritage that is not tangible, in that it is not written down. You have to rely on the actual sound. You have to rely on speaking with musicians, and indeed, you have to rely on recording, meaning audio and video recordings, so that some form of musical heritage can be preserved for present and future generations. I don't know whether this answers your question. I mean, as I said, it is a fantastic question, and it is huge. It is one of the key aspects of studying music. Some of it is written down, some of it is not. And what I work on is written down with an abundance of detail, and that's not always the case for other traditions.
I asked the two Chinese professors about a similar question, because we have a very short music educational history, and we have a little documentation left of nowadays. On the other hand, because Neil, you mentioned about understanding the society, and Professor Izzo also mentioned about 19th century throughout all these 200 years. What role do you think these unchanged things actually play? Neil, can you share some ideas about this?
I think it's we're seeing post-pandemic, certainly in the UK, we're seeing that our humans' instinct to congregate, come together, be in large groups, and music being the perfect bedfellow or the perfect accompaniment for that, whether it be a music festival or a live event. We're definitely seeing evidence, certainly here, because the vaccination program has been so accelerated. But I was surprised. I went to Reading Festival, which is a huge rock and pop festival in the UK. 80,000 sort of Generation Z, all out seeing these sort of lots of guitar music and singer-songwriters, and there was this real sense of relief in the air. I don't know if I was projecting on everybody else, but it left me thinking that actually, however much the live performance side of our business, of our industry has been affected for the last 2 years, the general public feels that the general public will always there's something in us that likes getting together and singing and dancing. That's it. We will always do it. We've always done it. I think we always will. We'll always enjoy going and seeing a performer that has, you know, when you have those nights when you see a performer, when their intuition and their experience hits the pinnacle, and you're part of this performance, whether it's musical theatre or opera or a rock band, there's this. Most of us feel it. We can feel it it's a very, very, you know, like Francesco mentioned about communication. I really felt that coming out. So what we have in rock and pop is there's now suddenly a sort of a paradigm shift where throughout the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, an artist could play live. There was lots of venues, there's lots of places to play, and you could build an audience direct to live, and then you needed radio and press and everything to scale your audience. I think what we're seeing now is an accelerated version of we're seeing artists have real growth, or performers or composing performers have real growth online via short video platforms, social media. So there are these huge numbers online. Then because the live development hasn't been able to keep up, there's a paradigm shift where we're seeing these recording artists having large audiences online, and maybe not always that there'd be a symbiotic growth with their live. But I think once we rebalance that, the society, human culture is that we want to get together. It's how we as intermediaries now connect the dots between this online audience. How do we get them into the venues, into the concerts? And that goes for every genre. That's not just mainstream rock and pop. I think that's very valid for opera, classical, music, all genres. So I think that's one core thought I've had post-pandemic. Also, we're seeing continued growth of the self-producing, self-composing individual that can write, create, record, master, distribute, and market and build an audience. So there's rather than having an ensemble that you need to go around to tour is very expensive. It's administratively and economically a very expensive process. We're seeing these individuals in hip hop and others, electronic music, create real scale and huge audiences without having to go around with multiple players and having a tour manager and all so that these businesses are growing despite live. So I think, and actually youth culture always backs up against the generation before as well. So we're seeing this sort of growth in grime and drill and various other sort of subgenres, which has always been the case. Actually, that is human behavior that hasn't changed. We've always, certainly since the 50s and 60s in the UK and in the West, your youth tends to bat up against the generation before. So if the generation before liked it, you don't like it. Rock and roll, punk, hip hop, history's littered with that. And that's still the same today. That's definitely, I have two stepkids. They try and find music that I don't like because it's their own, then they get to own it, and I think those core things, the human need to congregate with a backdrop of music, and maybe the human need to have their own, as someone young, is to have their own genre, their own thing that their parents don't like. I think you could argue that those two things are still prominent, no matter what's changed.
Right. We can talk about this for 3 days.
For 3 years.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yes. Exactly. Following what you answered, there were so many different, lifestyle get involved with the music's participation, and what kind of essential things from this participation actually play the role in our nowadays music education or music composition. For Professor Izzo, because I know so little about the opera. Later, I will also ask you about the comparison with the between the opera and the Chinese national music schemes?
This is another one about which we could talk for 3 years. But opera is both very specific and very general. Specifically, opera, meaning Western opera, originates in the Italian courts of the late Renaissance. There is an interest in reviving some of the aspects and the concepts of ancient Greek tragedy in this combination of words, drama, and music. And there is an interest in developing courtly entertainment, where the wealthy and refined courts in many Italian cities want to promote and support the arts, and so this new form of entertainment develops in a very specific historical context. But think much more broadly and think about how practically since music exists, we use music to tell stories. It goes back to what we were saying earlier about communication. So in that respect, European opera or Chinese opera, they do the same thing at a very basic level, in that they provide entertainment, often just entertainment that lasts a certain number of hours, so that it fills an evening or an afternoon. And they do so by staging stories and characters and providing sets and costumes. What is opera ultimately at the bottom line? It is multimedia. It is multimedia entertainment. One of our colleagues here at Southampton, Valeria De Luca, teaches a module in early opera, and it is called, the birth of multimedia entertainment, because that's what opera really does. From music, which is perhaps the central element, but not necessarily, poetry, sets, costumes, dance, and so on and so forth. It all comes together to provide this multi-sensorial experience. So in that respect, you can talk about an Italian opera, and that is a tangible, mainstream Western musical heritage. But then you can talk, I think, you mentioned in our previous exchanges, you also wanted to talk about some non-Western traditions, such as the mokam, in parts of today's China, for example, in Xinjiang. I mean, I'm not an expert in that field. I cannot comment specifically, but I know that there is this musical tradition, which is oral, not written, and that there are these basically suites of musical compositions. Some of them are instrumental, some of them are vocal, and they add up to a large-scale musical experience of a couple of hours or so, where you have the combination of music and other elements, and you tell stories. Maybe this is simplistic, but that's really what opera is at the broadest level. If you go back to the West and you look at musical theater is often regarded as a different form of expression and a different kind of entertainment than opera. And this is certainly true socially, but musically, the criteria and the mechanisms are always the same. What do you have? Characters, you tell stories, you dance, you hear some instrumental music, and that's really what happens in opera as well. So sometimes, we draw lines of demarcation. We compartmentalize things because it's convenient to do that. And it's also right, because we need to be specific and we need to be precise. But the experience of opera, the experience of musical theater, the experience, as far as I know, of some Chinese styles of opera is, at the bottom line, not the same, but there is a lot of common ground.
You both mentioning about telling stories and share the music with your children, but your children don't like the genre you like. They have their own. It's very interesting that nowadays in China, I can share with you that people nowadays, especially in the families, people don't tell these stories, don't share these kind of emotions with each other. People's focus are dragged to the different directions, even we are in a family. So that's why, I mean, in a in a very ancient culture, we pay so much attention to the gatherings, to the family gatherings, to the religious gatherings. That's a very good opportunities for sharing stories and telling stories. But nowadays, when we go to the concerts, when we go to the, I mean, under this technological and the environment has been changing so fast.
I acknowledge that what you're saying is actually there is some globally that we are in a situation where maybe the family or our community is being stretched and changed. Certainly in this country, in the UK, it's compared to other. I mean, I haven't got statistics, but the sort of breakdown of the Christian church, and also it feels like other European cultures, the Italians or Spanish, family is the most important thing. You work with your family, you live near your family, that is the priority. That doesn't seem to be such the case in the UK, certainly. And I agree in the sense that I agree that everybody having the entire world, the information of the world accessible on a tablet or a phone, it does create even further individualism, and even in the same families, people aren't communicating in the way. I hope people are aware of that, and then create opportunities for those form of communal, familial meetings and gatherings where the phones are put away. You have dinner together, or you go to a show together. I went to a show with my mother-in-law and my wife last week. Went to see Hamilton. It was amazing. In the most optimistic side of things, I think that technology is here, it's happening, we are being separated by all these screens, but human beings will find a way to live with that and add more community orientated. I hope so. And social media for good and for bad has only really exploded and grown so much because of humans' needs for connection. We're just talking about person-to-person connection, really, I think. But again, music is the perfect accompaniment to that. So I really think that's actually why, going back to your point about music's importance in society, and music is the way that is a way that we as a species communicate and associate with other people. And that is as rich as it's ever been. In fact, you could argue that's richer. People are building bigger networks because they are all fans of Billie Eilish, or they're all fans of Yu Wang, or so there's you see platforms like Reddit or Twitter, or you see all these people communicating. So you could argue that there's strengths and weaknesses in both. Pre-social media, I've got communication with people around the world that I would never have a day-to-day relationship with.
I mean, this is really a big issue. Our civilization is entering a quite different stage. It's more directed by the technology and by the social media, by the way that we communicate.
I think it's evolution. I think there's good and bad in everything. I think technology is obviously accelerating exponentially. So everything's changing so fast, and it has been, it's changing so fast. But I just think I think there's good and bad in almost everywhere.
Actually, not just to talk about how we can better compose or better do the research on the specific genre or the promotion or the business of the music industry. We actually can pay more attention to how our society, or how our cities, or how our countryside are actually formed, and what kind of a community is needed.
It seems to me that really is the crucial question that we've been talking about today. That there is. There are different musical genres, there are different traditions, some tangible, some intangible. There are different approaches one can take to music education, and different branches in music education, including at the university, we can study composition, performance, musicology, music theory, music business, and yet, the common denominator, this is really I'm just going to make this my final statement also because I will have to leave in a few minutes. But really what we're talking about when we talk about music is communication. Things change. I think Neil has spelled it out very effectively. Things change, and you know, generation after generation, we express ourselves differently, we communicate with others differently, but then some things don't change all that much. You know, even technology. I think that technology in the era of the COVID pandemic has been both an incredible asset. It has helped us to stay connected, but it has also revealed its limitations. I'll tell you just a little story in closing, and then of course you should feel free to linger and continue to talk with Neil. But last week I had an incredible privilege. I gave a concert, which was the first time I performed as a pianist since the start of the pandemic, in Italy, with an extraordinary soprano, operatic soprano, Lisette Oropesa. And before this concert, we were called for several media interviews, and some of these were done online. So there was one day in particular when Lisette was in London, I was in Italy, and at one point we were asked whether we could demonstrate a musical passage for the online audience, and we said no, we really can't, because there is no way, regardless of how sophisticated the technology is, that without being at the same piano in the same room, we are going to produce the musical effect we want to produce. So you really need to wait until the day of the concert and be part of our live audience, and then things will really happen, as they did. And this is not to reject technology. It is just to understand that certain things are complementary to one another, and they do not substitute one for the other. And communication is and remains the key. Communication through technology is one avenue, it is one pathway, and then there is live communication, which is also very important. And I don't think that there is any indication that music as a way of being together, including physically, socially, is going away anytime soon. I think I'm going to have to say goodbye because it is 10 o'clock here in the UK.
Thank you very much, Professor Izzo.
And I have to move on to another meeting. But thank you very, very much for hosting me. It's been a pleasure to meet you and
My pleasure.
To talk about these really fascinating and important questions. Always good to see Neil, my wonderful colleague. But I trust that I will see you again very soon, also in person. And yes, thank you, and good luck with everything. And I hope we will stay in touch.
Sure, thank you. And Neil, especially in China, seldom universities have your focuses. So music management, in the end, for many of the topics that we talk, may lead to no management at all, because you have your lack of a system to actually to organize all different parts of the industry into organic, actually, educational courses. You have been practicing music as a professional in the industry for many years. And also nowadays you come back to the university, and can you share the pathway?
I'm not an academic by any means, but I recognized there was a shift for me. So I play guitar and sing in the UK, and managed to have it as an independent singer-songwriter. I kept sustained a living until my late 20s, when I found out that you could do an undergrad Bachelor of Arts in music business. So I went to a new facility just outside of London called Academy of Contemporary Music, which is exactly the college. Very quickly, whilst I was doing my music business undergrad, I discussed with the directors of the college how they interacted with the music business, and very quickly we started a department, and I proactively went and met people in the live industry, and I accelerated my networking via this role on behalf of the students. So I did my undergrad, this is a long time ago, early 2000s. Even then, the music industry was going from a huge change from CD, from compact disc, to downloads, and piracy in the West was a huge problem, peer-to-peer file sharing. So the record industry was seeing this huge dip of their revenues from the very wealthy CD era. So I was already navigating a very changing music industry landscape at that point. Post that, I went on to consult to other rock and pop colleges about how to engage with industry whilst I was building my management and artist businesses. So, and over the last sort of 10 years, I've been concentrating very much on frontline artist management with various artists. But when I recognize, as I get older and the world keeps changing, I want to engage with bright young people who are digital natives, who grew up in this new world. You know, I'm a digital immigrant, so I learned. I didn't have a mobile phone till I was 21. You know, anyway, so the opportunity to work at the university on a music management master's appeals to me, because then I can use my experience and my network that I've worked on for a long time and work with great young people who are right at the forefront of the technological changes. And so we can together. So that's what appealed to me about the University of Southampton, coming back and working and having a think tank with young people like that. I've always been fascinated by popular culture. I've always been fascinated by why some things really connect that I don't think are that great musically. And, you know, the Spice Girls, for example, it was a huge phenomenon at the time. But I just thought, why do people like this? Anyway, so I've been fascinated by the music industry and the record industry all of my life, and my fascination continues. And what I've found really interesting as well, because we have quite a high percentage of Chinese cohort on our masters, is learning and especially speaking to your colleagues Tinko about the changes in the Chinese music business but fundamentally in copyright. I think that's what's happened in the last 2 years. I find the whole thing fascinating, and it's really where I find the business, and I read about it all the time, and I like talking about it and thinking about it. And so I can't ever claim to be an academic. I'm not a professor. I'm a fascinated student of the music business and popular culture and all the ramifications and the implications of that in the world, you know. So not academic, just fascinated.
I see. It seems that many of the students have a misunderstanding about why we need this higher education in music, because people are expecting to be professional, very academic, but actually fascinated by, you can actually have the knowledge of the music and learn something, and then it becomes something enlightened.
I think so, yeah. And I was taught by, he's passed away now, but I was taught by a wonderful guy called Keith Loud, who in the UK, we have the Performing Rights Society and the MCPS, which is the Mechanical Copyright Protection Society, and he was one of the heads of these royalty collection agencies or copyright management organizations. And he was an incredible futurist, and he really inspired me to, when I say he was an incredible futurist, he would talk, you know, in 2000 he was talking about how everything will end up in the phone. We will run. Wow. We will receive. You know, he was talking about this in 2001, and now we look at the world. Anyway, he was a fascinating guy, and he really inspired me to think like that and read like that and research like that. He was so I also think music isn't just a luxury anymore. It's not just for the wealthy, or it shouldn't be just for, it should be for everybody to play, to write, to be part of. This is where education is important. From not just higher education, further education, but you know, music woven into people's lives.
Right.
It's so important because of that communication we talked about, and it shouldn't just be the pursuit. Being a musician or being a lover of music shouldn't just be the pursuit of the wealthier classes. It should be for everybody. I really believe.
Right, right. No matter
And
you
I
are
think
rich or poor. Yeah.
yeah, and I think that's changing. That's certainly the democratization of music via streaming platforms, where you know, my stepdaughter is 17 years old, and any day she could be listening to Eminem or Buck or Rachmaninoff or the Greatest Showman soundtrack or Elton John or Fleetwood Mac, and so having access to all of the music, all genre, creates. She loves music, and she soaks up all these different influences and all these different sounds, and I can see evidence that actually a generation. There's an artist from the UK called Jacob Collier, who's he's a jazz musician, classical, you know, he's a multi-instrumentalist. He's a self-producing multi-instrumentalist. If you haven't heard him, it's mind-blowingly, you know, the music's phenomenal. But so he's only 25, 26, but you can tell he's from a generation of people that's heard all of this rich jazz, and you know, 100 years worth of recorded music they've got access, you know, that the world has access to now. I think it's informing a change, and we're seeing a lot more. I feel like there's evidence of innovation, and you know, the music's becoming more and more of a utility, in a sense, where it's not a luxury. You know, certainly in the West, lots of people have a streaming service. I'm sure it's the same in China. Most people have access to music on tap, on their phone, in their systems at home. You can listen to anything at any point of the day. That wasn't the case when I was a young person. And we're seeing evidence of all of that influence coming out in creation. However, it's much harder for the general public to find this music because there's so much music.
Right. And music itself is developed with the streams. It becomes more and more convenient and more you know, popular among common people. I think it's coming to the end of our panel, and please give us final suggestions, or what is actually the future of music education?
I think I like to, especially with the artists I work with, I like artists who really follow their flow, their natural flow. My natural flow, and being able to navigate your life and access your flow as a creative person or a business person or whatever you do in your world. Disciplining yourself through health, diet, exercise, whatever, yoga, meditation, to be able to access your natural flow as a creative person or as a musician or as a business, you know, I think that is a practice and a discipline that is essential. Now, when it comes to education, you know, when being in education as a musician or even as a business person, the attitude of heart of the individual or the student has to be that you meet some students and you know that they're going to do it. They're going to do something because they're relentless and they're working hard and they're networking and they're asking questions and they're just this person's got the energy that they're going to, no matter what, they'll find a path. So my advice to you is find those people and get inspired by them, stick by them. Those people who are just like, no matter what, I'm making this happen for myself. You should cut, you know. And when I've seen it many a time, when those cultures within a cohort of students, when one character can raise the culture and raise the attitude of the entire cohort. Other cohorts, you have a negative influencer that, you know, but my advice would be find those people that you really, you know, that are really kind of productive and motivated and energetic and positive and optimistic, and work with them. So, you know, it's all about getting the energy right. If you get your energy right and you work hard, you can accomplish, you know, you can accomplish what you really want to do, you know. And that's why education is key, because you can meet those people, you know, those people you can meet those people around you, find the people with the energy.
Fascinating answer. Yeah, I'm so inspired. Yeah. Thank you very much, Neil.
It's my pleasure. I look forward to working with you guys going forward in the future.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you very much.
Take care.
Yeah. Bye-bye.